Elizabeth Lake, a body of water west of Palmdale in Southern California, was once named La Laguna de Diablo, Devil's Lake, because early Spanish settlers said it was home to the devil's pet. What's the story around Southern California's most well-documented cryptid? We delve into the history.
Also, we have the details about the actress who jumped off the H in the Hollywood sign and who allegedly haunts it to this day.
Has poltergeist activity finally left us alone? No, big no. Hear our latest spookiness
on the Haunted Hollywood Hour podcast.
And welcome to Haunted Hollywood Hour, where we bring you 2 news stories every week until our demands are met. I'm Carly Heath, and I'm here with my friend and neighbor, Tanya Dixon.
Hello, Carly. Hello, everyone.
Today, I'm going to share with you some firsthand accounts of a cryptid in Southern California that has been seen by multiple people, has actually thrown and destroyed someone's wagon, and has even eaten 10 horses and at least 1 cow.
If you guys could see my face right now, I'm just hearing about this. So, what?
Tanya, what are you going to tell us about?
Well, I'm going to tell you about Peg Entwistle. She is the actress in the 30s who committed suicide jumping off the H on the Hollywood sign.
Oh, wow. I know of that story, but I don't know the details of it. So I'm excited to hear that. Before we begin, what's the spookiest thing that's happened to you recently?
Since our last podcast, I had an experience with an animal that I love very much. I'm an animal handler, volunteer at a ranch, which you know of. And one of our cockatoo birds passed away suddenly last week, which broke me up because I've loved her for 9 years. I was staying out at the ranch for a few days, and I had an interesting experience. The first night there, I laid my suitcase on the ground next to the bed and a chair. When I woke up the next morning, a huge white cockatoo feather was laying by my suitcase.
That is amazing.
And I checked with my friend where I was staying because I was house sitting, and he said I didn't have any of her feathers. I didn't have any feathers in the bedroom. That same night and the night after that, the lamp on the bedside table would turn itself off. Every time I turned it on, click. It wasn't a flickering like what we've seen. It was click, turned itself off. And it was a fairly new lamp. He had bulbs in it that worked, like click, turn itself off. And then I hadn't listened to the rough draft of our podcast yet. You sent it to me. It kept turning itself on my phone.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh,
yes.
That's right.
It did it for 2 days. And I would be in the shower and I hear your voice and then I'm like, is that me? Is that Carly? And the word paranormal kept coming up.
That's amazing.
Every time you said paranormal, that was what was playing on my phone. And I couldn't turn it off because it wasn't open. It was just playing.
I wish I could take credit for my mind powers doing this, but obviously there's something else.
Yeah.
It wasn't my fault.
Can you bend spoons? Are you able to do? Because I don't know what happened.
Well, I remember after we recorded that first episode, we went outside and the garage light flickered.
You're messing with a lot of electrical stuff because, but this didn't flicker. This was hard click off because you spin the little knob on the side.
Yeah.
And I'd turn around, it was like I was in some kind of Punked episode. I'd turn and be like, what? Didn't I just turn that on?
So do you think it's like the ghost of the cockatoo?
I do. I think she's saying my sweet Essie. Yeah. I loved her so much. It was my friend's bird.
Yeah.
And he let me love her, and I'm so grateful to him for that.
Okay, so my spooky story is I have been noticing the lights flickering a lot more. And in my little bedroom area, that one light that is just constantly flickering, I was like, I can't deal with you anymore. And I unscrewed it.
Wow.
But then after I unscrewed it, my rabbit is now she's got the zoomies. She was just very thumping very loudly. In the middle of the night, occasionally she hops up on the bed, but this time she's been hopping up on the bed in the middle of the night, just being extremely obnoxious.
And active, she's
active, yeah. She likes to pick up one end of the little rug and throw it around a lot. So she has a lot. I gave her some tarot cards to pull, and they're very, I was just like, what's going on here? And I got the reverse 10 of Wands. I got the 4 of Cups and the 5 of Pentacles. Yeah, the 5 of Pentacles, which are all kind of gloomy doomy cards a little bit. The reverse 10 of Wands is kind of like a end of a cycle sort of thing. You're carrying too much of a burden. You need to let it go. The 4 of Cups is kind of like a meditation vibe. Maybe like the advice there is to meditate, to tune in, to kind of feel the energy. And then the 5 of Pentacles it shows people outside in the cold with injuries, and they're walking past a church. They look like beggars. And so it tends to signal financial ruin. Feeling like you don't have the material possessions and stuff. So I'm like, I should have been specific about the question I was asking her.
What did you ask?
I was just like, what's going on here? What's all the flickering lights? What's all the woo-woo? So I don't really have an answer for those cards. I'm going to have to marinate. I have them laid out there. I can kind of think about what they mean. But I might go to Coco with like a more specific question, like, what do I need to know from this? Let's talk about our spooky Hollywood stories for this week. So, all right, so I'll get into my story. A lot of this info comes from scvhistory.com and la-explorer.com, and I'll drop links to these in the show notes. Let's take a brief trip back in time to August of 1886. We're in the middle of the Gilded Age. It's a time of materialistic excess marked by widespread political corruption. I think I got that from Wikipedia. Fashion-wise, 1886 saw the revival of the bustle dress. Fabrics were patterned, checks, stripes, loud, but the colors were still very muted. Embroidery, stones, gems, metallics, very gaudy, grandiose Victorian era dresses. Grover Cleveland is president. He didn't have a vice president, though, because his vice president, Thomas A. Hendricks, died in November of 1885 of a heart attack. And I didn't know this. They just left the office vacant.
Didn't even know that ever happened or was possible.
Yeah, so something to keep in mind. I'm going to have to, you listeners, tell us, is this how it's usually done? If the vice president dies, do they just leave it vacant, or does someone fill it in? How does that work? I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Very interesting.
Has nothing to do with our monster that we're going to talk about, but I was like, what's going on in 1886? It was a big year for the labor movement. This is relevant to me. There was a general strike on May 1st, which would inspire, that's why May Day is a big day in the labor movement. And there's a reason why we nationally recognized September 1st as Labor Day, or I believe it's like the first Monday in September is Labor Day.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not like September 1st.
Good 3-day weekend.
Instead of May 1st, because the May 1st general strike and riot was a little too radical for the United States to be like, let's recognize that. Okay, so general strike, great idea. I think everyone should do that. Led to the Haymarket riots. Kind of a good idea too, May 4th, and that ultimately led to us getting an 8-hour workday.
Wow, that's what created that?
Yeah. So, you guys, do you think we should have a 4-hour workday? Yes, because we have a whole lot more technology that we can do more work in less time, right? So we should all have a 4-hour workday. So let's do a general strike and maybe a Haymarket riot and get this done.
We only need 4 hours in an office.
We only need 4 hours a day. We only need it.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So Coca-Cola was invented May 8th, 1886. We don't need all the details on Coca-Cola. It had cocaine and alcohol in it.
That's all anyone really needs to know about Coca-Cola.
There was a big old flood that washed away every bridge in Los Angeles, causing a great deal of loss of lives. Didn't know this either.
Did not know that. I didn't know my LA history.
Yeah, this was also the year that Los Angeles got the land that would become MacArthur Park. In 1942, it would be named MacArthur Park, but this is the year it just got the land. Pasadena and Santa Monica are the first cities incorporated into Los Angeles County. William Mulholland becomes the chief executive of the Los Angeles Water Company. He's a big guy in Los Angeles.
And therefore, Mulholland Highway and Road.
Yeah. and railroad rate war opens up between Southern Pacific and Santa Fe, and the price of a ticket between Kansas City and Los Angeles is $1. Huge influx of visitors and newcomers to Los Angeles.
I heard $60 from Ohio to Los Angeles.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the influx now.
Oh, wow. 4 years earlier, the Brush Electric Lighting Company installs the first electric streetlights in Los Angeles and the first telephone poles as well. And I tried to get a sense of the population of Los Angeles at the time, and the best I could find was the 1860 census. There were 11,183 people in the city of Los Angeles and 33,381 people in Los Angeles County.
Wow.
And now, there's like 3 million?
Something like that.
Yes.
We're like our own country over here in Los Angeles, right? It feels like that, actually.
But it's also a small town where it feels like everyone knows everyone.
At least in our circles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get to our monster story. In August of 1886, the Los Angeles Times publishes an article titled "A Holy Terror, the Fiery Dragon of Elizabeth Lake." The subheading is "A Modest Story from Ventura / the Hideous Thing with Dinner Plate Scales, Headlight Eyes, and a Harpoon Tail, now paralyzing the natives."
Oh my God.
In it, the article says, "Last Saturday evening, the Free Press published a strange story told by a prospector from the vicinity of Elizabeth Lake. This is about 17 miles west of Palmdale. And of course, this paper gave no credence to the tale. Now, there comes to us, in confirmation of the prospector's yarn, a tale so weird and strange, and withal so well vouched, that we must accord it a degree of credence seemingly impossible."
Well, that was a very good word salad there, Carly, that they quoted.
They're basically like, "Yo, you guys, this crazy story came in. We didn't believe it at first, but then some other people confirmed it, and we're like, yo, here it is."
Yeah.
A little helpful background is given before they prologue this quite a bit with some context. They tell us that there's an old stage road from Los Angeles to Bakersfield that runs through San Francisco Canyon by Elizabeth Lake, and so travelers from Nevada and San Joaquin Country, which I'm assuming is the San Joaquin Valley, follow this trail to the Mojave Desert. A newly arrived fellow, Peter B. Simpson, had been coming from Nevada. He had an excellent wagon and a good team, plus a dozen cattle, and he was planning to go to Santa Barbara.
I know when I go to Santa Barbara, I always like to take a dozen cattle.
And take a good wagon, too.
And a good wagon, solid one.
On the evening, I mean, that's really funny to say, but like as someone who came from Nebraska with 3 sheep in my van,
really?
I'm like, I kind of relate to Peter B. Simpson.
Did you have a good wagon, though?
I had a good van that was rented, and I put a tarp down to keep the sheep
You had
droppings.
a good wagon.
I had a good wagon. On the evening of the 15th of July, the moon being then near its full, the little party encamped at the upper end of the lake about a half a mile west of the village. Mr. Simpson says that he noticed the particularly penetrating odor arising from the water. It seemed to float above the lake and to fill the little valley with vague, undefinable forms of mist. His cattle were allowed to graze at large upon the grass-covered plain. About midnight, when all were soundly sleeping beneath the covered wagon, Mr. Simpson says he was awakened by a terrible commotion which seemed to come from out in the lake. There was an awful roaring, he said, like the muttering of distant thunder, accompanied by a particularly loud, indescribable hissing noise. Of course, Mr. Simpson arose at once and seized his Winchester, but he could see nothing. Far out in the lake was what seemed to be a black cloud, and below it the water was seething and boiling. Shortly after returning to sleep, there was a great rushing through the air as if of mighty wings, and the wagon was lifted bodily from the ground, carried about 20 yards out into the plain, and dropped, making the wheels a total wreck. There was an immediate stampede of stock, and the terrified family arose at once from their recumbent positions. But they only saw their stock scattering over the plain and a dark form whizzing through the air in the distance. The noise of rushing wings continued, growing fainter, then all was still.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, a thing just picked up your wagon 20 feet, moved it 20 feet over and dropped it. And all the cows are like, bye.
That is very Game of Thrones.
I know.
Right?
Yeah. For a moment, Mr. Simpson thought that he had encamped in the path of a cyclone. Thoroughly bewildered, with a rifle in his hand, he stood listening intently to the great silence which hung upon the desert. When, from out of that stillness, there arose afar off the sound of a great conflict. Peter R. Simpson is a brave man, for across the desert he followed that sound. I wouldn't.
Nope, hard pass on that.
I would be like, I'm going to hide inside my tent with this very large boulder to keep me from being lifted up. It seemed as though 50 battering rams were rattling together against the mailed sides of some moated fortress. Arriving at the summit of a low knoll, Mr. Simpson passed and gazed down into the little valley below him, and all over the scene there fell a flood of warm southern moonlight. The monster had come upon a drove of antelope sleeping in the gulch. I wish there were antelopes still there.
Oh, I know. Yeah, no, there's not.
There's not, because capitalism,
bad humans,
white people.
But true.
Okay, antelope sleeping in the gulch, and the monster had attacked them. About 10 feet from where Mr. Simpson stood, a fine buck lay bleeding, bitten clean through at one stroke of the thing's horrid jaws. Around another buck, the monster's wings seemed folded, while its long tail, barbed at the end, played around the pair incessantly, evidently seeking to transfix the antelope. Keep in mind, this is published in the Los Angeles Times.
Wow.
2 other antelope were vigorously trying the effect of their short horns upon the scaly sides of the monster. They're like headbutting this. So they must have been mama antelope, and that must have been their baby. That's all I could think.
Yeah, because what animal would go up against something like this? Animals, mostly, especially these kind, are flight animals.
Yeah.
Right? So they normally would have taken off. There was something else at foot.
Yeah. Mr. Simpson's description of this thing is very distinct. It was about 30 feet long overall, I should judge, he said, and of a warm reddish color, with a long snout and jagged yellow teeth. It had enormous wings, rigged like those of a bat, evidently, long hind legs, and a long tail with a seemingly hard, barbed point. From its head and neck fell a shaggy mane, and its huge eyes gleamed like 2 horrid fires. For 10 minutes, Mr. Simpson stood as one fascinated by this strange conflict. And then, being a keen sportsman, he lifted his gun and took a shot at the monster. He heard the bullet strike and rebound. By the way, if you're all listening to this and you're thinking, okay, so Mr. Simpson had a story he told to the Los Angeles Times, they printed it, whatever. You guys, we are about to get confirmation from other people of this story, and we're gonna get like decades of people and sightings.
Well, and there's a big difference between stories and eyewitnesses of things and truly corroborated things. Yeah. Because in history, there's a lot of stories that we know are made up and all of that, but when you have it corroborated by a lot of eyewitnesses, that's when it becomes a story on
so Mr. Simpson is shooting at the beast. The bullets are just bing, ricocheting off the scales. Then, disturbed by the shot, the 2 antelope took to flight. The beast in the grasp of the monster was transfixed a moment, and the thing arose into the air, carrying its prey in its mouth, and made for the lake, where it sank with a splash that must have been audible for miles. scales. There was no further disturbance that night. In the morning, Mr. Simpson returned to the scene of the strange conflict and secured the carcass of the dead antelope. He also picked up some scales, which his bullet or the horns of the antelope might have knocked from the sides of the monster. I want these scales.
And they were dinner plate size, right?
Yeah. So these scales are round, semi-transparent, about the size of dinner plates, and of a reddish glazed appearance, somewhat similar to ground glass. Mr. Simpson still has them in his possession. Mr. Simpson, I know you're dead, but can you come through the lights via the flickering and the tarot cards and tell me where are those scales? What happened to them? I want them. Returning to the camp, he collected his stock, dispatched one of his boys to the lake village, procured another wagon, and continued on his journey to Carpinteria, where he intends to reside permanently. At the village, he heard for the first time of the appearance to others beside himself of the Elizabeth Lake monster. So, that was 1886. He was not the first to see this Elizabeth Lake monster. In 1780, Junipero Serra named the lake La Laguna de La Laguna de Diablo. La Laguna de Diablo. Guess what, actors? That is going to be your new vocal warm-up exercise.
Red leather, yellow leather, La Laguna de Diablo. Laguna. Oh, Lordy, it's not easy.
She sells seashells by the seashore. Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. La Laguna de Diablo. La Laguna de Diablo. La Laguna de Diablo. We did it. Yay, okay.
By the way, that's Spanish for Devil's Lake.
In 1780, Junipero Serra named the lake La Laguna de Diablo because some people who lived there believed that within it lived a pet of the devil. According to Major Horace Bell in On the Old West Coast, which is a book I'm assuming, no one would settle in the valley in spite of the fertile soil and ample water because of that monster. In the 1830s, a Don Pedro Carrillo is reported to have taken up a grant of land in the area, but 3 months later, after building a house, barn, and a corral, abandoned his new hacienda because of the supernatural being. Major Bell quotes him as saying, "Conditions there made me prematurely old." According to LAalmanac.com, one of the earliest recorded stories from the 1830s recounted that Don Pedro Carrillo abandoned the ranch on the lakeshore after structures on the property were destroyed by a mysterious fire, and Pedro blamed La Laguna de Diablo.
La Laguna de Diablo. La Laguna de Diablo.
Pedro blamed La Laguna de Diablo. Okay, sometime after 1855, another settler took a chance. Chico Lopez moved in, bringing another Chico, last name Vasquez. One day in 1883, Vasquez rode up to the ranch house, greatly excited about something in the lake. Everyone immediately saddled up and dashed to the shore. When they arrived, they heard a thunderous whistling roar from a thick growth of cattails and could smell the foul breath of the beast. Then they made out the silhouette of a tremendous monster, as large or larger than a great whale, with enormous bat-like wings, which flapped periodically as though trying to arise from the mud. It churned the water to a froth with what appeared to be huge flippers or legs. The men fled in terror, as who wouldn't, and returned the next day with a squad of armed cowboys, but the beast could not be found. Sometime later, the Lopez livestock began to disappear. One night, there was a loud commotion in the corral, and the men reached the spot just in time to see the great winged creature flying away, outlined with terrifying clarity against the moonlit sky. A count of livestock revealed 10 horses missing. The horses could have run away. I mean, if like a fence was broken, or they could have spooked and ran for the hills.
The winged monster just might have been one of speed, though. He might have just...
So does it go on like plucking each horse off the hillside and gobbling it down really, really fast? Is it a UFO taking the horses
and beaming them up?
Beaming them up, yeah, and doing experiments on them.
And we know if that's happened in our time where it's been documented, of course it was going on back then.
I mean, like, did you see the Unsolved Mysteries about the cow?
Yes. Yeah.
right.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
if we're in a time where we can document it in our age, well then, of course it's been going on.
Yeah. And so is the monster a UFO? I don't know. I'm just...
Bad breath, because we don't know if aliens have bad breath. We don't know what their smell is.
Bad breath... The exhaust from the machine. You know, a lot of people think like the Thunderbird that was reported by Native Americans was a UFO.
Yes,
possibly. I don't know. So lots of things it could be. I don't know. So because 10 horses missing, big ol' scary monster, Chico Lopez immediately sold out and left the country.
As any of us would have done.
Yeah. The land was then bought by Don Felipe Rivera, who planned to capture the thing and sell it to a circus, and is said to have signed a contract with the Cells Floto Show, which promised to shell out $25,000 for an unusual attraction, which had to be like $25 million today. But it could also be like, yeah, you catch a dragon monster and I will give you $25 million.
Right. And we know that circuses and animal entertainment of any form are horrible.
Yeah.
So look how about far back this goes.
Yeah. And also so as far as like paranormal podcast goes, there's a lot of Bigfoot podcasts, which I'm a fan of. But this is why male podcast hosts are terrible. Every single like Bigfoot podcast and stuff I listen to, there's always a dude on there who's like, well, what we have to do is we have to shoot the Bigfoot because that's the only way we're going to get confirmation.
Yeah, the male
and
masculine, toxic, aggressor. Although I will tell you, I was just reading about a couple of women who have been posing with a lot of animals like giraffes and hippos. It's just widespread.
The toxic patriarchy is affecting everyone. Yeah. But I'm just saying, this is why we need to get more women in the paranormal spaces, because whenever you have women who are like investigating things, there is a much more keener awareness of being oppressed and being marginalized, and you have empathy for the creatures and cryptids and paranormal things out there who are also oppressed and marginalized. So if anything is going to appear to someone, it's probably going to be someone who is not a white cis male.
Because those guys, their energy is toxic.
If your energy is out to hunt something.
Yeah, so any creature, any being is going to pick up on energy.
Yeah. By the way, good time to shout out my friend Fen Alancouche's Follow the Woo podcast, because they're all about that. Positive vibes with cryptid and paranormal stuff. And stuff appears to them because they are not,
aggressive.
Yeah, exactly. So one day while searching, Rivera, this dude, he's like, I want to get $25,000 from the circus company. He actually finds the beast. Another account says that Rivera encountered the beast attempting to eat one of his steers. The beast was resting on the shore. At the sight of the man, it took fright and began waddling back to the safety of the water. The brave Don Felipe ran alongside, firing at it with his .44 Frontier Colt revolver. Dude, if you're trying to get a creature to not run away, don't shoot at it. If you want your $25,000 from the circus, what are you doing? So he said later that the bullets hitting the creature rang as though striking an armor plate, and the next day he returned and picked up his slugs, which had been flattened by the impact. Rivera described it as about 45 feet long and as large as 4 elephants, with a bulldog head, 6 legs, and enormous wings, which it kept folded along its back.
Spaceship. Just saying.
Could
really
tripod.
Be. Yes.
Like landing gear.
The bullets.
Yeah. Okay. LAalmanac.com says rancher Miguel Leones, who subsequently acquired the land, reported his own encounter with a griffin-like creature at the lake. Upset with disappearing livestock, Leonis claimed to lay in wait for the creature one night and attacked and injured it, which he believed caused it to flee the area, possibly for good. Leonis was the last to report any sightings of a creature at Elizabeth Lake. The story, however, went on to say that a creature of similar description began appearing in Arizona, where it was ultimately killed. I didn't look too much into the Arizona thing. That will have to be a future episode because I've already talked about this for like 40 minutes. Descriptions of the creature are close to that of the Thunderbird, which we talked about. The Thunderbird is common in Native American mythology. Some people say the Thunderbird was a UFO, and some suggest that the creature may have been a California condor. Condors have a wingspan of 9 or 10 feet, not quite 45 feet, but dudes exaggerate, especially when it comes to size.
Oh, yes. So right there, we can't go off of that. But I will say, if it was a condor, let's just be devil's advocate, that wouldn't have the effect that it did on the livestock. A condor's not going to be
causing things to scatter.
Yeah, and picking up 10 horses.
Yeah.
In that amount of time.
Is a condor going to attack an antelope or a steer?
I don't believe so, but we need to look that up because I don't.
Yeah. Okay. So listeners, Google and find out if condors attack antelope or steer.
And if they have bad breath. Because they did state it had bad.
Okay, so some comments from guests on laexplore.com said, I lived overlooking Elizabeth. I've fished it hundreds of times before it dried up. It was dried up from like 2013 to something, and then now it's got water in it again. Okay, so they said, I lived overlooking Elizabeth. I fished it hundreds of times before it dried up. I was trolling for trout about 6 a.m. one day, and I was using 20-pound leaded line. I hooked something in the main lake. Something started dragging me the opposite direction, west. The line broke. There were some big catfish, but nothing that could break a 20-pound leaded line. At the local bar, Lucky's in town, a little alcohol caused many local residents to share similar stories. So I wrote this down. The lake went dry in 2013 because of drought, and from 2012 to 2023, enough rainwater fell in the lake that is now at peak levels. And the reason it's called Elizabeth Lake now is because in the mid-1800s, there was a little girl who fell in the lake, and her name was Elizabeth. She didn't die, but people were like, we're calling it Elizabeth's Lake now because she fell in.
When a child falls into a body of water.
Yeah. So that is the story of the Lake Elizabeth monster.
That's pretty interesting.
What do you think?
I think it was an alien spaceship.
Really?
Yeah. If you start adding up what some of the eyewitness things are,
the bling bling,
a lot of it, the legs, like you said, landing gear. It struck me interesting that those bullets were flattened. That's against metal. That would make more sense, or an alien version of metal. Yeah, right.
When that guy came across antelope, though, and his wings were folded over the antelope as it was eating the antelope.
Well, okay, there's that. But we don't know what an alien spaceship would do.
Yeah.
To have experiments and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, there might have been a lot of alcohol, not just at that pub Lucky's, but a lot of alcohol with a lot of the eyewitnesses before that.
Yeah.
The tale of the fish that one caught. So I think anything's possible.
I mean, it could just be a now extinct animal that then fled, maybe they're in the Sierra Nevadas. There's other creatures that had, this one came down.
Well, I think it's going to be important and interesting to look into the Arizona, the next chapter of this.
Yeah.
I think that we'll get some more answers.
Yeah. Maybe, I wonder if anyone's ever gone up there to look for fossils, to dig around in Elizabeth Lake and see if there's bones, see if there's any...
Would love to know the depth of the lake before it went drought.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting.
I'm sure it was really big in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Very cool.
Tell us your story, Tanya.
Okie dokie. Well, all right. What, Carly, do you think is the most iconic site in Hollywood?
Well, obviously the Hollywood sign.
Yes.
Actually, my apartment, when I first moved here, I could see the Hollywood sign from my apartment window.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, it is something that almost everybody around the world knows. All cultures, all languages. And it is a beacon of hope for a lot of people, but especially performers. And that was true for Peggy Entwistle. Have you heard of her?
When you said the name earlier, I didn't recognize the name, but then you said the actress who jumped off the H.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I've heard that.
Peg Entwistle. So she was born in 1908 in London. She was British actress. She did die by jumping off the letter H in Hollywood on September 16th, 1932. And
she was young.
She was only 24 years old.
Oh, no.
Yes.
You guys, don't.
Yeah.
It gets better.
So
I remember when I was 24, 24 sucks. 24 sucks so bad. You guys, if you're 24 and your life is sucking, just like hang on, just wait it out. Wait it out.
Well, wait till you hear the end of the story, Carly.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, this is actually an advertisement for hanging in there.
Yeah.
Because some interesting things that happened after her death. So anyway, she was from London. She came to New York with her then father in 1913, and he actually also performed on Broadway, as she did as well. She was quite successful on Broadway. She had around 10 performances. As a young girl, she worked with some pretty famous actors, and she was known to have some depression, as told by several Hollywood experts. My friend worked for Dearly Departed Tours, which was a great iconic tour company in Los Angeles for many, many years. And he shared a little of what they had researched about Peg, and that she had been depressed. And like many performers, you think you're so close and you're not really sure where your next move's going to be. She actually had come after her father died, and many performances on Broadway. She did come to Los Angeles, but only that same year in May. So she hadn't been in Los Angeles very long. She lived in Beechwood Canyon with her uncle, and the house where they lived is still there today. And she was depressed, as many artists can be. He didn't see it. She actually told him a little fib and said she was going down to the drugstore with her friends, and instead she went to the base of Mount Lee and began an arduous hike and climb up the mountain to Hollywood sign. Now remember, you guys, there were no lights.
So this is at night.
Pitch dark. She encountered wildlife. There were coyotes and snakes and, mountain lions. We have all of that here in LA in the hills.
Oh, I'm sure there were more mountain lions.
And there were more then because it wasn't as populated.
Yeah.
So it was pitch black. And by the way, the sign at that time was still Hollywoodland. That was before they took the land off. Remember, a realty company had owned it. So she did climb up in her nightgown, and she did leave a suicide note. The woman that discovered the body the next day found some of her clothes and a purse, and inside it was a suicide note. But anyway, back to, she told her uncle that she was going for some drinks and fun with her friends, but she had planned all along the suicide. So this was not a last minute thing. She planned this out. She jumped, and to this day, allegedly, her spirit haunts the Hollywood sign in her pink nightgown.
Do people see her?
Many people have seen her. And to the point where a show that I love, and you probably love too, Zach Bagans' Ghost Adventures, they actually did an episode about this, and my friend's former boss at Dearly Departed, he was the expert on there.
Oh, cool.
So now we can't go up, it's been a long time since people can easily hike up to the Hollywood sign.
I rode my horse up there a couple times, and you can get to, there's a road, there's like a fire road that goes, and it kind of goes out, and then you can kind of get a photo taken with the sign in the background, but you can't actually go right to it.
Okay, yeah. I think that now the hiking trail, you look down upon it. Don't quote me on this, but I do believe I read that there are sensors up there now which immediately trigger the helicopter police, so you can't really hike up there. Like, I've had friends back in the day that used to crawl up to the Hollywood sign, crawl literally up there and get high and sit on the letter, so which... There's a goal, but you can't do that now.
Now that I'm thinking about it, like when I go to the barn at night, because I'm at the Los Angeles Equestrian Center, and, you can see the back of the hill that has the Hollywood sign on it. Occasionally I'll see helicopters up there, and I'm like, is it a suicide? Is it a...
It's hikers
so I
a
wonder
lot
if
of
it's just hikers being troublemakers.
They are on you if you keep hiking up there. Yeah, there's no hiking to the sign these days. You can look at it from below, you can look at it from above. But back to Peg, she really endured a lot to get up to that letter H. It was arduous. Now, she did do one film called 13 Women. It was not finished. It wasn't edited before she jumped to her death, depressed and feeling defeated in Hollywood. And interestingly enough, it was released after her death to some good reviews and stuff. So there's the story that I mentioned of hang in there.
So it looks like she was a pretty high billing. She was number 9 on the cast list.
So I wanted to read something that she told a reporter in 1929, because again, she did have acting success. This wasn't someone who was, just struggling along with some deadbeat job, wishing. I mean, she was on Broadway. She was cast often as a comedian, though, most often the attractive, good-hearted ingenue. Anyway, in 1929, she told a reporter, "I would rather play roles that carry conviction. Maybe it's because they are the easiest and yet the hardest things for me to do. To play any kind of an emotional scene, I must work up to a certain pitch. If I reach this in my first word, the rest of the words and lines take care of themselves. But if I fail, I have to build up the balance of the speeches, and in doing this, the whole characterization falls flat. I feel that I'm cheating myself. I don't know whether other actresses get the same reaction or not, but it does worry me." So even at a point when she was having success, there were and a lot of that resonates, I think, with a lot of actors.
Yeah, it sounds like she's very in her head about everything.
Yes.
And which can be hard creatively if you're overthinking things.
So it was on September 18th, and remember, Peg jumped on September 16th. 2 days later, a woman was hiking below the Hollywoodland sign. She found a woman's shoe, purse, a jacket, and when she opened the purse, she found a suicide note. She looked down the mountain then, and she saw the body. And when she reported her findings to the Los Angeles police, she also just laid the items on the steps of the Hollywood police station. I guess that's what one did back then. That's odd. When the detective and 2 radio car officers found the body in the ravine below the sign, they identified it as Peg Entwistle. So he connected her 2-day absence with the description of the initials P.E. That's all she put on the suicide note, which was later published in newspapers. And what she wrote was very brief. It said simply, "I am afraid. I am a coward. I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain. P.E."
I'm afraid.
But she doesn't say what she's afraid of.
Are there any theories?
Not really. I mean, when you do the research, it doesn't really say much more as to why, like the coroner listed her.
Maybe she's saying, I'm afraid, like she's writing this before she jumps. Yeah. So she's afraid of death. I'm afraid of the act of death, the act of suicide.
I'm afraid I am a coward. Interestingly enough, probably because of the location, her death brought wide and often sensationalized publicity. So I think it's kind of hard to separate a lot when you research her. There were a couple of pop culture films that weren't really huge, but one in particular that were about her. And then Ryan Murphy's Hollywood, they touched on it with a film that was a fictitious film called Meg, which was based on her story.
Okay.
In 2014, 10 years ago, about 100 people marked the anniversary of her death. They gathered in the parking lot of the Beechwood Market in Hollywood, near where she lived with her uncle, to watch 13 women on an outdoor screen.
Oh,
wouldn't that have been cool?
Yeah.
And get this, proceeds from a raffle and from the food and beverages sold at the screening were donated to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in her name.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I think that's really cool.
Like her legacy lives on.
Her legacy lives on. She thought it would be as a successful actress, and this is where it lives on. So
I wish I knew more about her home life, and was her family abusive?
Allegedly, her mother died when she was young, but then many researchers say that there was no evidence of that. Oh, get this, she was briefly married and divorced by the time she got to LA, and her stepson.
So like late teens, early 20s.
Yes.
Oh, which is not good.
No.
Yeah.
She was upset because she found out her husband actually had a 6-year-old son already from a previous marriage. And that son was actor Brian Keith, who was known for his work on the TV show, when was it, the 60s, I think, Family Affair.
Oh, wow.
But she didn't get to be his stepmother, but that was her ex-husband's son.
He was in the 1961 Parent Trap. He was in Young Guns. Wow, he was in a lot of things.
Oh, yeah, he was a very big actor of his time. Very big. His more commercial success was with the TV show Family Affair. But I just find it interesting that, I mean, it's always a couple degrees of separation in Hollywood, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. This infamous story of a ghost that haunts the Hollywood sign actually had a stepson that he was a beloved character actor.
Yeah. Let's look up her astrology chart. February 8th?
5th.
Oh, 5th. 1908?
Yeah, she was married in 1927 and divorced in 1929 to Robert Keith.
Wow. So she has a Venus-Saturn conjunction in Pisces. And what I notice a trend amongst Venus-Saturn conjunction people are eating disorders. I mean, she was very thin. So a lot of like really, the pressure of being female, really feeling that really hard. She also has a Uranus-Neptune opposition in Cancer and Capricorn axis that are really, really close to eclipses. I wonder if she died during an eclipse or around an eclipse. Mercury is 0 degrees Pisces. Those 0 degrees Pisces always and her sun is almost conjunct Chiron, which often speaks to like a wound that will never heal. And she has a Jupiter Sun opposition. So really, really interesting. I wish I knew if she was a day chart or a night chart, but that Saturn Venus conjunction really stands out to me as in Pisces. So she's actually having her Saturn return right now too.
Wow. Does it show in what you can decipher in this chart that her end would be the kind of ending it had?
I don't have her birth time. I don't know if she's day chart or a night chart, but just that Venus Saturn conjunction just speaks to that intense pressure, that intense female pressure to the weight of societal expectations, self-sabotage and eating disorders. Just every single time I see a Saturn Venus conjunction, there's always an eating disorder thing in there.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And what was the date of her death?
September 16th, 1932.
There was a recent eclipse, it looks like 2 days ago, 2 days before her death. And so then they were in the 2-week period between the next eclipse. So that's a time where a lot of people die. We've noticed it this year with this year's eclipse. We had James Earl Jones passed away. Someone at the barn passed away.
Dame Maggie Smith.
Yeah, Maggie Smith passed away. Yeah. Eclipses in the house across the axis where her Saturn and Venus were.
It's just
pretty strong.
It's really sad to me that so soon after her suicide, the one film that she did was really...
It's really interesting though. Venus was conjunct her natal Jupiter when on this day of her death. So that kind of does speak to there is a fortunate thing aspect to it. Maybe the fortunate thing is that's what led to her becoming famous, and that led to this lasting legacy. Fascinating.
Yeah. We'll have to take a drive up to the Hollywood sign at night. They don't light the sign since I believe it was 1978 or around there. It had to be completely restructured, the sign, and they didn't raise the money to also relight it. Because remember, it used to be lit.
Oh, did it? Oh, okay.
It's Hollywoodland. It was lit until the 70s when it was really falling apart and deteriorating rapidly. And it was rebuilt, and they didn't include the lights.
Oh, that's too bad.
I know. I always wish that was.
But also, it's super wasteful.
They could be solar lights.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
Solar lights
could
would
be
amazing.
Yeah.
And it would be a good symbol of what solar lights can do. If it can light the Hollywood sign, it can work for you.
Yeah,
right?
There you go. Yeah.
You could be pitching a new Hollywood.
So, what are you working on? What are you looking forward to?
this podcast.
Yay.
And what about you?
Yeah, I am full on. We're trying to get 3 more episodes recorded and edited before Halloween. I'll see if I can meet my goal.
Are you dressing up for Halloween?
Oh, at work, we're having a little thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fun.
Yeah, what about you?
Are you going to dress up as...
Well, we're doing a Mario Kart theme at work, so I'm Princess Peach.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fun. A friend of ours from the picket line, Austin Lane Walker, always does a monthly fun variety show called Varietyville, and it's his Halloween edition. And it's going to be a hoot. Haven't decided my costume yet. Still working on that.
Okay.
I
think you need to be chimp crazy, Tanya.
Oh, that's right.
Because you're Tanya, and
I still have to watch that.
And I have a blonde wig that you can have, and you just have to wear pink, like, tracksuit and then get a stuffed chimpanzee.
Chimp crazy. I need to watch that immediately. And I love traditional horror characters. I've never been the Bride of Frankenstein. I love to. And then I think you can't go wrong with your cool version of a witch.
Yeah.
It's simple, and how many people are witches, but I just love that everybody has such a different spin on it. But I do like the crazy chimp lady story.
Yeah, I think you really should be chimp lady, because your name is Tanya.
Yeah.
And
You don't
her
have to
name
have
is
a
Tanya.
stuffed chimp, do you?
I don't know.
Okay. Anybody have a stuffed chimp out there?
But I think
Let
we
me
can
borrow
find
for
one.
Halloween.
I think we can find one. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So if you guys enjoyed this, definitely give us a follow on Instagram at Haunted Hollywood Hour podcast, all one word. And if you have something that you want us to talk about, email us at hauntedhollywoodhour@gmail.com and we'll do it, or DM us on Instagram, and be sure to give us a rating and review on wherever you listen to your podcasts, and tell your friends so that we can get more people enjoying.
Can't wait to see what comes in, like what stories
I know
people want to talk about.
Yeah, we'll do
That's
all your
exciting.
stories.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.